Good afternoon and welcome to this session of Wilmington City Council's Finance and Economic Development Committee meeting. Today is Monday, April 20th. On March 20th, Mayor Michael Brzezicki presented his budget for fiscal year 2021. At that point, it becomes Council's responsibility to review the budget. This is our third in a series of budget hearings. Today, we will be hearing from the Department of License and Inspection, and following that one, we will hear from the Department of Real Estate and Housing. I just wanted to acknowledge the council members that are with us today. President Hanifa Shabazz, First District Councilmember Linda Gray, Fourth District Councilmember Michelle Harley, Councilmember at Large Rashima Dixon, Councilmember at Large Ciro Adams. Did I miss anyone? Okay. What I'd like to do is just kind of run through the format that we've been following. We will have a brief presentation by the Office of Management and Budget. Then we will turn it over to the Commissioner of L&I, Mr. Jeff Starkey. He will make any kind of presentation, and then we will jump right into the question and answers. We've set a time limit, 90 minutes for this budget hearing. I will ask council members to keep all questions to budgetary matters. Any programmatic or constituent issues should be addressed in other forums. If we don't complete all the questions in the timeline that we have, I encourage you to look at the department response or follow up with the department commissioner or with Marshall Bassnight, our chief of staff, who's also with us today. There will be some time allotted at the end of the hearing for constituent comments, and anyone who would like to speak can raise their hand anytime during the meeting. And then they will be recognized in that public comment period. I will ask that they keep their comments to 3 minutes and that the comments pertain to the budget hearing at hand, which is Department of License and Inspection. As we all know, this budget was prepared late last year, early this year, before the pandemic hit us. But we're going to go through the process. But I believe we'll see changes in this budget, and we probably will be back in the fall to revisit the budget once we know what kind of losses we've taken in everything. So having said that, at this point, I'm going to turn it over to the Office of Management and Budget. Who is representing them today?
I am Mr. Chairman.
Excuse me?
I am Mr. Chairman Daniel Owens.
Daniel, how are you, sir?
Okay. Nice to hear from you.
You ready to go?
Sure, I am. Let's start to say good afternoon, Chairman Friel, Madam President, and honorable members of City Council. I would like to thank you for inviting me to present the licenses and inspections fiscal year 2021 proposed budget request on behalf of the Office of Management and Budget. First, let me remind you that further details on the L&I budget can be found in the budget packet as well as in your budget book beginning on page 128. Additionally, I would like to add that the budget details I am presenting here are based on the original proposed budget, which was developed prior to the COVID-19 pandemic. Commissioner Starkey will be discussing revisions to some of his budget items during his part of the presentation. With that being said, the L&I department is requesting a total budget of $5.66 million in FY 2021. This total request represents an increase of $98,000 or 1.8%. Funding for the department is derived solely from the general fund. Personal services increased $173,000 or 4.1%. This was mainly due to an increase in regular salaries, which are up $129,000 or 5.2%. The contractual agreement between the city and the Ask Me Local 1102, of which nearly 80% of L&I's employees belong to, provided a $500 increase to each employee's base salary in addition to a 2% cost of living adjustment or COLA. A 2% COLA was also budgeted for all other city employees. Hospitalization costs also increased, up nearly $27,000 or 3.5%. MS&E decreased a total of $41,000 or 5.3%. $12,000 was added to furniture, fixtures, and office equipment to provide more ergonomic chairs and desks to the L&I staff. However, this increase was more than offset by decreases to demolition and hazardous cleanup costs. To more properly align with the historical actuals, demolition costs are now budgeted at $350,000, a $50,000 decrease, while hazardous cleanup is budgeted at $15,000, a $15,000 decrease. Internal services increased by $16,000. This was primarily due to an additional vehicle being added to the L&I fleet for the zoning enforcement officer at a cost of $15,000. The animal control account line, which consists of money transmitted to the state of Delaware for animal control services, decreased $51,000 or 16.6% to reflect the actual contractual costs. This concludes my presentation of the 2021 proposed budget request for the L&I department. I'm happy to answer any questions at this time. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Daniel. I do want to make one clarification. There will be a public comment period at the end of each hearing. So at the end of L&I, we'll have a public comment period, and then again at the end of real estate and housing, we'll have a separate public comment period. All right, at this time, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over. I also want to mention that we are joined by the Chief of Staff for Mayor Brzezicki, Tanny Washington. At this time, I'm going to turn it over to the Commissioner of License and Inspection, Mr. Jeff Starkey. Jeff, did you unmute your button? We can't
Can you hear me? Can you hear me now?
Hear you now. Thank you, Jeff. Yeah.
Before I start, I'd just like to add, I'm having some low bandwidth, so I'm popping in and out. So if I pop out, that's the reason. I just want to thank you, Councilman Frill, and members of City Council for providing us the opportunity to present our 2021 budget. First, our prayers go out to anyone who may be experiencing the negative impact of coronavirus. Secondly, I want to thank our staff for continuing to provide L&I services to our constituents. We are being challenged every single day while we navigate through this crisis. Our staff has stayed the course as their daily activities and processes have changed. For that, I'm thankful. Now we are prepared to start the presentation.
Okay, sir.
Our vision: Department License Inspection strives to promote and protect a safe living and working environment for all citizens of the City of Wilmington. This is achieved by implementation of fair and unbiased Wilmington City codes. Our goal is to facilitate voluntary compliance by working in partnership with our constituents. Together, we can successfully achieve a prosperous future for our city. Departmental priorities for this year, and some of this was prior to coronavirus. Schedule and complete 2,000 rental inspections. Continue to explore converting housing violations to from criminal to civil penalties, and identify non-licensed rental property owners. Performance measure: respond to all constituent complaints within 48 hours of receipt. Inspectors' compliance rates for inspectors, and track and identify non-rental license owners.
Okay, you ready to get ready to the questions, Mr. Starkey?
Ready to go.
Okay, discuss the budgetary account lines that could potentially be impacted as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic.
Well, obviously, since this occurred, we'll be purchasing a lot more PPEs, which is personal protective equipment. That's one of the line items, obviously, is going to go up when we get back to normal. And as we're continuing to work through this process now, we anticipate potential overtime going up as well. And our consultant line item is going to go up potentially.
Why do you feel the consultant line will go up?
Well, as you can see, we're anticipating deleting the vacant plans examiner position. And right now that will leave us with one. So we would bring a consultant in periodically to assist us to reviewing construction plans.
Well, you might have answered this question then. Discuss any current vacant positions, duration of vacancy, timeline for filling the position.
Well, our plans examiner position has been vacant since February 12th, 2020, I'm sorry. We also had a retirement of our existing plans examiner, which was in November of 2019. So we've been short on plans examiners in the last, I would probably say, year or so.
Discuss any proposed changes to positions, any new positions deleted, upgrades, downgrades.
We currently have none.
What we just discussed. Discuss the $500,000 budget between the property maintenance and demolition account lines.
We have performed demolitions and various structural stabilizations on properties that could potentially lead to demolitions if the owners don't rectify the conditions. We continue to monitor those properties and reserve funding for that work. Anticipated demos, 903, 905 Kirkwood Street. We stabilized those. They could lead to demolition. 734 East 6th Street. We stabilized that one as well. Could lead to potential demolition. 1016 West 3rd. And again, we stabilized the property. Could lead to demolition. And just Thursday of last week, had a major fire at 109 West 26th, which we're in the process of demolishing now, which is a major, major project. We typically don't use up all of our demolition. We try to get through the winter and try to start working on it around April or so, just to make sure we get through the winter and we have enough funding available to do demolition. But we've had two in the last couple of days. Have 109 West 26th, major warehouse church fire. It's going to cost us upward probably in the $90,000 range. We have one Sunday. Council President Anifa Sabaz is aware of this one, 1126 B Street, which we're in the process of demolishing now, starting tomorrow, which is going to cost us about $45,000. So those two in the last week, things can change very rapidly. Anticipated property maintenance issues based on our property maintenance budget or historical data is received from inspectors' field inspections. However, it's done on a case-by-case basis. Although it was mentioned in the question that we've only spent $31,000, that's actually incorrect. We had a carryover PO, which allowed us to use some of that money as well. So we're up in the range of probably about $59,000 now on property maintenance alone. We haven't received invoices since for February and March. So he's got a ton of invoices to get in to be paid. So we're trending pretty close, probably a little lower than what we did last year, just because we've had a calm winter. But that's where we are with those two line items. Next slide, you'll see that's the picture of the fire that happened Thursday. It was a major fire. The building's totally destroyed. Property owner has no funding, so we'll end up, we've actually torn it down. So it's already down now. So we got to foot that bill and actually bill the owner for that. The three that you're looking at on the next slide, Kirkwood Street, we stabilized. That's the 903, 905 Kirkwood. The owner hasn't done that since we stabilized it. The one in the middle is East 6th Street. It's been stabilized. That's a 3-story building. And the one to your far right is 1000 block of West 3rd Street. That owner has no funding as well. It could potentially lead to a demolition as well. Okay. Discuss the $265,000 allocated for animal control
Provide the number of animals retrieved compared with the same time last year.
Animal control is actually housed in here, and it's a state contract. We basically get the numbers from the animal control office, which is displayed on the screen.
All right, so in fiscal year 2018, there were 618 animals retrieved, and this year 851, so a jump of over 200.
Right, and they go by quarters, by calendar year.
Right. Okay. Discuss the planned use of 68,000 budgeted memberships, registration, and wearing and apparel account groupings.
Well, employee certification and C.E.Us, which is continuing education units, training as per union contract for our employees that hold certifications. All required resource books and materials for inspectors to perform their job tasks, and provide all necessary safety equipment for employees as per union contract, which obviously we're in the coronavirus, so we're going to up that as well.
The employee certification, has any of that been put on hold because of the virus and people not getting together, or is it being done more through Zoom meetings, things like that, do you know?
Well, we had actually scheduling 2 of them by the end of the year, but most likely they'll be canceled. So it'll probably run into whenever we're released to do gatherings. I'm not so sure they're doing the Zoom as of yet, the ICC organization that we use, but we're looking into that as well.
When you say the end of the year, you're referring to the fiscal year or the calendar year?
Fiscal year. We usually schedule one in May and June.
Gotcha. Okay. Discuss the planned use of 50,000 budgeted for professional fees.
As I mentioned, we have several different consultants that we use. The structural engineer who conduct assessments of structural issues, including property slated for demolition. As I mentioned earlier, a plan review consultant due to vacancy and retirements. We bring in periodically a roof consultant to assist us when we have a question with roof, as well as a tree consultant. And then also in that line item is our GPS tracking for our vehicles.
Why would you need to bring in a tree consultant? Wouldn't that be handled by the individual in Public Works?
He can never facilitate the amount of tree requests that we get. I mean, he's so busy with the trees that he's dealing with. We're usually put on the back burner, to be very honest.
Okay.
And he deals primarily with the public trees. We're dealing with private property trees, more issues. He just can't get to our stuff in most cases.
Okay. Discuss the 50,000 budgeted for overtime. Specify process for checking permits for weekends and evening hours.
Our overtime is primarily used for the emergency on-call person, which we have a person on 24-hour call after 4:30, and also accommodate staffing for our L&I review board. Right now, there is no funding in there for any weekends or permit or evening checks.
So anyone that complains about work going on the weekend, you really can't visit that issue until Monday morning.
That's correct.
Discuss the budgetary request for an additional new motor vehicle to be added to the city's fleet.
Well, as you know, we added a zoning enforcement officer, but we're short one vehicle for that person. So that vehicle will be critical for him to do his following up on zoning related issues. He started around August or October, I think somewhere around there. So he's on board now, but we don't have a vehicle for him to use at this point.
Is an item like that potentially going to be cut because of the financial crisis we're going to find ourselves in, or we're already in, due to the virus?
Well, I mean, I'll have to meet with the chief of staff in the mayor's office just to, I'm sure we're going to go back and look at all the budgets right now. Some of this was put together prior to Corona.
Okay. The last question is the same for all departments. It's the org chart that council members can review at their leisure. Were there any questions from council members?
Right now, the org chart has in there 43, but we're recommending to delete that one position, so it would actually be 42.
Okay, thank you, Jeff. Okay, we'll go ahead and start. We've been joined, which I didn't realize, with my council member, Chris Johnson, and we'll go ahead and start with him with the first question. Mr. Johnson?
Thank you very much, Chairman Friel. Yes, I'm up. Okay. Just in regard to the vacant property demo line, has L&I gone into or researched using clearboarding at all for vacant properties instead of the standard wood boarding?
We looked at that some years ago, but we haven't looked at it recently.
Okay. Is that something that the L&I could possibly pursue down the line? Because it's my understanding that, the technology has advanced within the past few years, maybe making it a little bit more cost effective.
Certainly we can look at it. I mean, we'll look at any new technology, but we'll take a look at it as well.
Okay. And Chairman, I have a follow-up question.
Sure.
Just in regard to the budget line for aggressive code enforcement, it's budget line 101-210. What does that entail? Is that this inspector time? Is that extra overtime that's included in that? Because I did notice the line is, fairly substantial. It's about $350,000. So is that an all-encompassing budget line?
That's primarily used for demolition of buildings.
Okay. Okay. So it's not code enforcement as much, but it's demo work.
This demo work, as I mentioned, we had a fire on Thursday last week. That's going to cost us about $95,000.
Okay. All right. I have no further questions, Chairman. Thank you.
Okay. Councilmember Gray? Councilmember Gray?
I just have two questions. I'd like to know why there was a decrease in the animal control money if you picked up more animals this year than last year, or was that the state that picked up more animals?
It's my understanding that the county chipped in their portion of it, and that decreased our total bill for animal control. But I'll have to confirm that.
Okay. Okay, thank you. And one more. Has anything been considered, or are people thinking about how to sanitize an apartment? If you know someone's had the virus and they've moved out of the apartment, there should be a 2-week, 14-day, exposure from someone moving in or using that apartment. Has L&I thought about that, or do you think the landlords are aware of that?
No, we haven't had those conversations yet, but I'm sure once this is all over, we'll be having a lot of conversation on how we deal with, inspections, condition of properties, and so forth.
Thank you, because the only reason I brought that up is there's evidence that it lives 14 days on hard surfaces. So someone unfortunately had the virus and moved out. I was just concerned about the next person moving in, but thank you.
Understood.
Councilmember Dixon. Thank you, Chairman Friel. I had two questions, maybe three. I think I got two in one. So one is I saw for the furniture line that there's an increase of $12,000. Will that be considered to be cut due to, since it's a non-essential?
Actually, I would prefer that, not because some of these folks are sitting in chairs that are or not, in good condition. So in order for them to really fulfill their tasks and to do their jobs, they need to be sitting in something worthy of sitting in. Otherwise, we may have some medical issues with them. I mean, some of them are for ergonomic chairs, and that's the purpose of it.
Is there, and just to follow up to that, is there a way to either find refurbished or something that's at a cheaper price in order to still accommodate that need?
Not sure. I haven't looked that far into it. I mean, some of these chairs are probably 15 years old. They haven't been replaced in so long. So we really need to look at providing them the necessary tools to do their jobs.
Okay. And then my next question would be, I saw that and it kind of go off of the demolition conversation I already started. So I understand why there's an increase in it, but I also saw that for each year prior, the numbers are not equaling up to as much as was budgeted for. Is there a reason why? Are you being replenished for some of those funds, or are they just not being used?
Well, everything that we do, demolition-wise and property maintenance-wise, we build a property owner. So in some cases, we get, replenish those funds. But, it's somewhat difficult sometimes to anticipate what's going to fall, what needs to fall. We try to be cautious with that as much as possible. So we wasn't anticipating the two fires, or the fire we had the other day, or the structural wall that's fallen. So that just happened, and it happens like that sometimes.
Yeah. And then just a last follow-up to that. How often are we picking up the tab for people who cannot afford to pay for their demolition?
If it deals with any safety issues, we do it. We have to do it. We can't leave it in an unsafe condition. The fire that happened Thursday, the roof was hanging off. We had to go in there and do something with it because kids are playing around there a lot. So we make sure that it's code compliant when we leave. And then, as I mentioned before, we send them a bill for that work.
And how much you may not know this offhand, but how much are we picking up the tab? I guess I'm just trying to number-wise know how much we're picking up if they're unable to pay for it.
Well, every property maintenance one we do, we pick up the tab unless they pay us, and we send them a bill for it. Same thing with the demolition. They can't afford to do it, and it's a safety issue. We take care of the issue.
Is there, my last follow-up, is there a way for us to get some, a range or just a number of how much it's costing us to do that?
Well, if you look at the expenditures, that'll tell you what we spent. We were not going to do it if they could afford to do it. So if we spend the money, then we're picking up the tab for it initially anyway.
I think what she's asking, Jeff, do we ever recoup any of that money that we use with demolition line, or is it pretty much to the point where we end up taking them to sheriff's sale or something like that?
Well, rarely we recoup. Every now and then we may recoup some of it, but you got to realize if we spend $30,000, $40,000 on demolition, by the time we're done, the lot's probably worth $2,000. So in most cases, we have to take it to sheriff's sale to recover anything from it.
Thank you.
But I could go back and see if we recovered any funds from either demolition or property maintenance.
Thank you. We appreciate that. Councilmember Harley?
Yes, thank you. So yes, I was asking Commissioner Starkey what happened on B and Hill Street, and that's where we left off. That's the last place where I left off.
All right. Mr. Starkey, you still with us?
Yeah, can you hear me?
I can now, yes.
Yes, so we received a call from Council President Hanifa Shabazz on Saturday that she received a complaint from someone that says that the building was in fear of collapsing. So we immediately sent someone over to take a look at it. And in fact, the roof is now compromised. So we had all the cars removed and had a barricade, and in the process of demolishing, hopefully starting tomorrow, because the roof is completely gone and the walls are pushing out.
Okay, so
Did you have another question, Councilmember Harley?
We lost her again.
Councilmember Harley, are you still with us?
Commissioner?
Yes,
Yes,
we
go
lost
ahead.
you.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
I hear you now.
Yes, so who gets the bill for that?
the property owner gets billed for it.
Okay, all right. So I guess we can talk about this offline because I think there's an opportunity throughout the city.
Hello?
She keeps going in and out. Sorry, Ms. Harley, we keep losing you.
And there may be an opportunity for us to put a policy in place that even if your property is paid off, you know, maybe there, you know, they can be required to still have whole, you know, property insurance.
You mean for the vacant property?
Yes, sir. Yes, like I said, we can talk about it offline. I just know that they're in.
Keep losing her. Ms. Harley, you keep, Councilman Harley, you keep going in and out, so we're gonna kind of move on. It's okay. And you can discuss this issue with the commissioner further.
Could talk about it on offline. Yeah, definitely. But thanks for that information because I seen that incident on social media. I couldn't tell if it was a fire or what was going on. So thank you for that update. And then my second question real quick is that you said that we're going to be getting PPEs in. And I guess my question is the city going to be giving out mask or, you know, do you know anything about that? I know the chief of staff is on this call. I've been getting calls about it and I just wanted to know if we're going to be giving them out.
The ones I'm referring to are just for our employees that are doing inspections.
Okay. Is the chief of staff still on the line?
Yes, I'm here.
Hi, how you
Hi.
doing? Yeah.
Are you speaking of the general public?
Yes, I mean, are you aware of any initiatives that we're doing to provide masks? It's just a question.
Yes, so that question has come before the COVID working group. So they're working on something, getting masks out to the general public.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. Thank you. That's all
No
I have,
problem.
Councilman Friel.
Thank you. Before I went out, I zoomed out. I believe Councilmember Adams had a question. Did you ever get to ask your question?
Actually, thank you, Chairman Friel. Yes, I gave way to Councilor Harley so she could finish her questions.
Okay.
With that, right. I have two unrelated questions for Commissioner Stark. Mr. Stark, with regard to rental inspections, how many rental inspections did you do last year and how many will you do in the coming fiscal year?
I don't have the number in front of me, but somewhere I think, if I recall correctly, we were in the 1,700 range, but I'll confirm that with you. Our goal for this year was to do 2,000.
Oh, super, super, good, good. Glad to hear that. And hey, hopefully we'll keep that number going upward each year. The other unrelated question, with regard to the demolitions of these properties, I know you had 4 on the screen here or whatever. How long from the time when you finish the demolition to those properties are transferred into the land bank? You know, in other words, how long does the city actually have a hold on that? I know there were many questions asked about the cost of that, but I would just like to know how long from the time you demolish the building to its transition into the land bank.
Well, keep in mind, when we get involved, we don't own the property, so we're demolishing them and then we have to put a lien on them or send them a bill. Then we would have to take it to sheriff's in order to take ownership of it. So the time frame, I'm not exactly sure how long that will take, but it can take up to a year or so, depends on the circumstance. But again, we don't own them, so we're just demolishing them just to rectify the safety issue, and then we have to put a lien on the property.
Okay, so these properties that you had listed on your budget then were private properties where I guess the condition of the building was so poor that they needed to be demolished. And then you subsequently.
That's correct. I mean,
Okay,
Yeah, they're all privately owned, so,
got it.
but, you know, they're privately owned and they're privately owned and the owners aren't responding to our notices, or in the case of an emergency, we emergency demolish it.
Certainly, and then understood if there was a major fire that would be an emergency. Yeah, actually, Director Starkey, I believe I asked you the same question last year, and I apologize for that. Thank you. Hey, guy, you have a good day. I'm done, Chairman Friel. Appreciate it.
Thank you, sir. President Shabazz?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Commissioner, can you share with everyone,
Go ahead.
all right. It won't let me. Okay, there it is. You unmute me. Could you share with everyone the variance of costs of a demolition? I know that sometimes it could be, I know you said 40,000, but I've also known there's there's also a time when a demolition could cost maybe $60,000. I just trying, just for information purpose, so people understand the cost of demolitions.
Well, right now we're getting prices for 2 stories. Probably depends on if there are 2 walls versus 1 wall, between 35 and 45,000. To get up to 3 stories, you're probably 45 to 60,000.
Okay.
And the one that we had the other day, which was unusual, which was the warehouse, that's going to be up in the range of 80 to 90,000.
Okay. Thank you. And you usually do, we don't do that in-house. We commission or contract someone out to do that, correct?
That's correct. We usually bid them out. We try to get 3 quotes when it's not a non-emergency. And if it's an emergency, then we just call who's available at that time to get it done.
Which is why we have to have some money on hand to do so if we have an emergency demolition.
Absolutely.
Okay. Also, when you mentioned too about the increase of animals that you you were able to exterminate, was any of them raccoons? Or were they? Or that's all pest control? Was that all just the cats and dogs from the pest control division of the state?
Well, I think the animal control is mainly for the dogs. We generally do pest control out of another line item periodically.
Okay.
We don't have a specific line item for that, so we just try to pick it up occasionally every now and then when we get a chance to do it.
That's what he said. I kept moving it around.
But that was not the reason for the increase of number of animals, because you did the amount of raccoons that Councilwoman Oliver has in her district.
No, that's not even listed in there.
Okay. Thank you. That's all I have.
Okay, I don't see any other questions from council members.
No, my hand is up. Raise
All right,
hand.
well, it's not showing up here.
Right there.
Trevor Oliver,
Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Yes, I
Oh,
can.
there it is. Mhm.
Okay. No, I want to clarify that it had a gentleman come out and a private contractor, and he was able to catch some raccoons, and that was from Public Works. So maybe, I don't
Okay.
know. So they caught quite a few raccoons on the north side of town. I went out there and met with him. And like I said, that was from Public Works, but even with LNI, they were able to come out and catch some possums, not raccoons, but Public Works was able to catch some raccoons.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Not seeing any other questions from council members. I'm going to open it up. If anyone from the public would like to make comment in regards to the budget for department license inspection, you can raise your hand at this time. Not seeing any hands raised. All right, so we're going to go ahead and conclude this hearing with the department license inspection. We're going to take a little break, and we will be back at 5:30 with the Department of Real Estate and Housing. I thank you all for your attendance and participation. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, sir. Good evening and welcome back to this session of Wilmington City Council's Finance and Economic Development Committee. We are in the middle of budget hearings for Monday, April 20th. We just heard from the Department of License and Inspection, and now we're going to hear from the Department of Real Estate and Housing. My name is Bud Friel. I'll be chairing the meeting. I just want to acknowledge the other council members that are joining us. President Hanifa Shabazz, 1st District Councilmember Linda Gray, 7th District Councilmember Chris Johnson, 4th District Councilmember Michelle Harley, 6th District Councilmember Yolanda McCoy, and at-large members Ciro Adams and Rashima Dixon. We are reviewing Mayor Michael Pazicki's fiscal year 2021 budget. We're going to follow the same format that we had followed earlier. We're going to have a brief presentation from OMB, and then we're going to turn it over to the Director of Real Estate and Housing, Mr. Bob Weir, for any presentations, and then we're going to get into questions and answer. One slight change, I had one colleague ask if we could do question number 8 first, which deals with the CDBG budget. So we will do that, and then we'll go back to the regular order. There is a time limit of 90 minutes on this budget hearing. I'm asking all council members to keep questions to budgetary matters. Any programmatic or constituent issues should be addressed in other forums. Any questions that we don't complete, council members can follow up with staff or the department director. There will be a period at the end for public comment. Constituents will have 3 minutes to make comment based on the Department of Real Estate and Housing budget. You can raise your hand anytime during the meeting, but you will be acknowledged during the comment period. Okay, so at this time, I'm going to turn it over to the Office of Management and Budget, who's with us this afternoon.
Good afternoon, Chairman Frail.
Good afternoon.
Okay. So good afternoon, Chairman Frail, President Shabazz, and honorable members of council. Before I begin, I would like to note that the following budget was finalized before the COVID-19 crisis began. I will be presenting the budget as it was originally proposed. However, Director Weir will be discussing any potential modifications to the budget as a result of the coronavirus. That being said, the Department of Real Estate and Housing is requesting a total general fund budget of about $3 million. Of that amount, $2.3 million is in the administrative division and $700,000 is in the rehabilitation division. Overall, the general fund budget increased by about $1.1 million or 61% over FY 2020. Personal services increased by about $120,000 or 74%. This reflects the transfer of 1.27 FTEs to the general fund from the Community Development Block Grant or CDBG fund. This is because per federal regulations, no more than 20% of CDBG funded activities may be administrative in nature. Therefore, any amounts paid from the CDBG fund that exceed this administrative cap must be charged back to the city's general fund. Over the last 4 fiscal years, an average of $111,000 has been charged back to the general fund each year. So in order to avoid this unbudgeted expense to the general fund, address prior year audit findings, and properly comply with federal regulations, the Department of Real Estate and Housing is thus reallocating FTEs to the general fund. MS&E increased by a little over $1 million or 129%. This is largely due to a budgeted $1 million grant to the Wilmington Neighborhood Conservancy Land Bank per a 2016 MOU between the city and the land bank. In addition, consultants increased by $83,000 to fund a consultant to coordinate the department's home ownership program, while also serving as a liaison to the land bank. Funding for this consultant was previously housed by the CDBG fund, but is being moved to the general fund to comply with the 20% administrative cap. Finally, debt service decreased by $109,000 due to a reduction in costs associated with a projected debt refinancing. This concludes my presentation, and I am happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. I wanted to mention we've been joined by Councilmember Cynthia Oliver from the 3rd District. At this point, I'll turn it over to Mr. Bob Weir, the Director of Real Estate and Housing, for any opening remarks prior to us jumping into question and answers. Mr. Weir.
Thank you, Chairman Friel. Thank you to City Council Committee for the opportunity to present the 2021 FY budget for the Real Estate and Housing Department. I'd also like to take the opportunity to thank the staff of the Real Estate and Housing Department for the hard work that they have put in this year, and we anticipate they'll put in the coming year. As far as the vision of the Department of Real Estate and Housing is to improve the quality of life for the residents of the city of Wilmington by increasing the supply of affordable housing, improving housing markets, and the existing housing stock, by promoting self-sufficiency and engaging in activities to stabilize and revitalize neighborhoods. Thank you. Our 3 really top priorities are to increase the supply of affordable housing that is decent, safe, and sanitary. Engage in activities geared towards stabilization and revitalization of neighborhoods, and increase homeownership opportunities through city-sponsored initiatives and collaborative efforts with nonprofit and for-profit developers. We are looking at the coming year as far as our top performance measures are to administer and/or fund housing programs to preserve existing occupied housing. That is primarily owner-occupied properties that we can take federal funds and help them either rehab or facade improvements. Increase the availability of affordable homeownership units. That is partnering with our nonprofit partners in the community, but also it includes using federal funds and actually doing homeownership production in-house, so affordable homeownership. And we also have a focus on down payment settlement assistance. Partnering with the Delaware State Housing Authority, we believe that we can do over 65 units through a down payment settlement assistance program this coming year. And we're also looking to support organizations that provide services to Wilmington's most needy residents.
Okay, like I said, we're going to jump to the end and do question 8 first. Discuss the planned use of the approximate $3.7 million budgeted across community development block grants. And I'll be honest, I cannot remember all the acronyms for the other funds.
The home dollars, the ESG is emergency shelter grant, and the HOP was housing for people with AIDS.
Thank you.
So as far as under care funds, the city was just recently awarded the amounts that you're seeing here, the CDBG for FY20 at $1.3 million, emergency service grant in year 20 for $647,000, and HOPWA for year 20 at $117,000. When we look at that, this is, I heard this used by a number of consultants and folks that work for HUD. This is kind of like we are flying an airplane and building at the same time. I attended an hour-and-a-half webinar this afternoon where HUD was actually rolling out the rules and regulations for these care dollars as we spoke this afternoon. So their rules and regs are coming out as quickly as possible, but certainly the money was awarded before the rules and regs are put in place. As far as the regulations that we're going to adhere to, they are still in a fluid state. We are working with the COVID-19 work group. We have a meeting tomorrow scheduled with our HUD consultant to make sure that we know every possible way that we can address community needs with these dollars. And then we look at having feedback really from the mayor's office, from members of the community, from members of city council, from the organizations that we're currently under contract that are providing services in the community. The one thing that is clear with these care dollars is that they must address individuals that are affected by the COVID-19. so that when we talk about federal funds, we talk about the admin caps and things like that. They're constantly moving at this point, but we are looking to take those dollars and really be a conduit to organizations in our community that can deliver services, deliver supplies as quickly and efficiently as possible. As far as the actual budget dollars that we've been given, once again, we adhere to the federal regulations regarding the criteria and selection of organizations and projects. They're followed in this presentation in a detailed manner. What basically happened in that process is that, one, the funds were advertised not only to all the folks that had previously been recipients, but through the social media and also through a widely distributed local newspaper. And once we did that, and there was a time period that was required, that was advertised. There was an advisory committee, and that was made up of city council representative, real estate and housing staff, representative from the mayor's office, members of the community at large, and a member of the continuum of care. This year, we actually had a formerly homeless individual and a veteran that was added to the committee. Those folks went through the applications, as you can see in the following slides. In the slide deck, there was requests that far exceeded dollars available. So there you go. As far as we're looking at $794,000 were requested, and we had about $232,000 to actually distribute. These organizations, project title, the amount requested, and the funding recommendation, and the source you see in front of you. This is also scheduled to go through a public hearing process, a public hearing, and also a public comment process. So as far as this still has the ability to have some modifications when we talk about the goal of the department is to be a conduit for these dollars to organizations in the community that can get these services and supplies to the most needy citizens of the city of Wilmington as quickly and efficiently as possible.
You want to go through the rest of these charts, Mr. Weir?
Sure. I mean, as far as the idea that, again, once again, as far as each of these funding sources, if you look at what was requested versus what was available, our requests far outstripped our actual resources. In this particular case, the amount for HOPWA was close to $1 million, and we had about $700,000 that we could make available to these organizations. In the previous slide, I think the number was ratio about the same. So there's 372 in emergency shelter grant, and there's 173,000 that was recommended by the panel for these various organizations. Now, when we look at that care money, certainly that might be an answer to some of these funding recommendations in the shortfall. But again, we have to make sure that we have the federal regs squared away, and then the community input, along with just being as clever as we can with it, because the resources are still not enough for the demand in the community.
All right, at this point, I'll take questions from council members just for question number 8. I believe I see Councilmember Harley's hand. Councilmember Harley.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you now. Did you have a question for Mr. Weir?
Hello, can you hear me, Councilman Friel?
I can hear you now, yes.
Okay, I'm not sure if my question is number 8 or not, but I wanted to ask Mr. Weir, when did they start reaching out to these different communities? I think it's a great idea. I'm happy to hear that we are doing something, and we are doing it in a collaborative manner. But when did all this start? And I'm only asking so I can be informed as to what's going on, because this is my first time hearing all of this, and I'm happy to hear about it. But did y'all start this a week ago, 2 weeks ago? And how did people know who needed to come to the table?
Well, as far as Councilwoman, the process that started with the budget year, that started in December. So we had sent out notifications to all the agencies that were currently getting money, any agency that had previously applied and maybe not had been funded. So we started that process really at the turn of the calendar year. The committee met in February and March. So as far as when we talk about this process, this is a yearly process that takes about 4 months when we talk about start to finish.
Oh, okay. So basically, these are organizations that you had already started working with and identified those organizations as the best, I guess, conduits to get the mask and the COVID items out to the community.
Yes, well, we certainly talked to the folks that we're already dealing with, but then we advertise separately so that say for instance, with social media and with folks throughout the year that we might have conversations with, they get put onto a list also. So we really try to be as comprehensive as we can to make sure that the availability of these funds, and that's also part of what federal requirements are, so that we do the best we can to make sure that everyone that is interested in these funds knows what the deadlines are, knows what the applications are. We actually had a meeting that was before any of the applications started, and did a technical capacity building with the folks that were interested. So yes, we deal with the folks that we deal with on a yearly basis, but that's not a limiter for us. We are always looking for new organizations to get involved.
Understood. And lastly, I think I heard you say that you basically have more demand than you have money.
Yes, absolutely. As far as, there's some discussion, of course, as far as the efficiencies and things like that. But yes, it's pretty much of a standard operating condition that the demands or the applications that come in are always greater than the dollars that are available.
Understood. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Councilmember Dixon?
Yes, thank you, Councilman Friel. I have a few questions. So one would be, how many new organizations have applied for the funding that's available out of the organizations that routinely apply each year? And then my second question would be, how much of that funding for each one of those lines have been expended thus far? And then my third would be, how are we determining the distribution amounts? Like we said, HUD is changing on a regular basis as far as the amounts and for care. But I'm just wondering how we're going to actively think about organizations that may not be traditionally on the list, who may be providing services during COVID, that could use those, and what the plan is in order to execute that.
I think I'll take the easy one first, as far as how much money that was awarded in previous years is spent. And generally speaking, that has been a high percentage. We are also increasing our outreach to the agencies that currently are under contract, keeping them big time as far as on task to spend that money, to make sure that they are spending that money. When we talk about the new folks versus we've had 2 new agencies that are being recommended for funding this year. The ballast of these agencies and projects have been funded in previous years, so that there is a door open, and we found at least 2 organizations that we're recommending for funding this year. Did I capture that at all?
And then if I can get the actual amounts, that would be great, as far as like where we are in each one of those lines.
Yep.
Um,
Yeah, that's, I'm sorry, I thought that you might have the PowerPoint already, but that certainly can get you that PowerPoint. You know, I'm looking at the two agencies that were new this year, the Teen Warehouse and the Urban Bike Project were the two agencies that are funded this year that were not funded last year.
Okay. And then the last question was, how are we determining and what's the plan for expending the COVID care funds?
Care funds? Well, I think first and foremost, we have to make sure that we know the limitations and what we can and can't spend it on. We have a working group here in the city that is represented by finance, law, real estate and housing, so that we're looking to put that as far as the horse before the cart. And then I believe what the plan is out of the mayor's office is to actually look for community feedback, very similar to what we're doing with the regular federal funds on a yearly basis. But I think that the urgency is a little bit higher, given that the demand and the change in the environment is so radical. But there are a number of cities that are struggling with getting the exact same answers that we're looking for, so that you know, I don't think that we're behind the curve there. In fact, we have a HUD consultant, and I think we're probably a little bit ahead of the curve, to be honest with you. The fact that they announced the money doesn't mean that they're going to write a check yet.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, Council President Shabazz.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Director Ware, I just want to make sure that I got a little confused there 1 minute in listening to some of the questions that was answered. I just want to make sure I was clear in my understanding. So the allocations that you're demonstrating for question number 8, and they're requesting the distribution, that's from the regular CDBG dollars that we get normally. That's not the COVID-19 dollars, because that's just been told that we have it. We don't have it in hand, and nor have we done any type of determination where we're going to distribute it. Am I correct?
Absolutely correct, President Shabazz.
So those persons that were there are just following our typical process that we've always followed in requesting for those types of dollars. Am I right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I just clarity for my understanding. And so we will be looking to provide resources to those who are doing COVID-based initiatives per the federal regulations in our delegation of that monies of the COVID dollars that we get. That would be an open far-reaching process and with great input from the community, correct?
Correct.
Thank you for getting that clarification for me, sir.
Yeah, the two funding sources, they're the same names, but they are absolutely different focused.
Thank you, sir.
Focused funds.
Councilmember Oliver.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, okay.
No, I think Council President said it all. I was under the interpretation when Mr. Weir started off. It seemed as if this was something new, and I was saying to myself, this been an ongoing process. I've seen some of these names before in the past who have applied for this type of funding. It's just that times are hard, and I see some new names. So I know times are hard because some of these businesses or companies would never even apply for the city of Wilmington. It just lets you know how things are tight across the board to see so many people putting in requests that never put in a request before, because we're not a human services organizations, even though we do give out some funding. But to look at this large list, it seems as if that we are in the human service field, and I know we're not. But I mean, I just wanted to make that clear, that looking at some of these names, I'm like, wow, some of these people used to just fund themselves. They never even had to come out the door to even ask for money. but things are just tight across the board. But I know this has been an ongoing process. So that's, I'm basically reiterating what the president said. I know this is normal for some organizations besides maybe a few of them, but just to look at their long list. So I was just going to I was going to really just ask the question, state that I knew this wasn't a new process. That's all. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, thank you. Councilmember Harley?
Repeat the question, but I guess at this point, since there has been clarification, where can we, council members, be updated on what is going on? I just like to know what's going on, so when questions are asked from the community about these things, I can be informed. So I guess, Mr. Weir, you know, how can the council members be updated on the progress in terms of any updates as relates to this COVID topic?
Well, I'll commit that out of this office, we will, once there's a clarity on the federal regulations and what we can invest in, that would be a first key for me to send that out to City Council as far as in a summary. And then as far as through the mayor's office and through the working group, I'm sure that we'll be able to up that communication highway so that we're all aware of what's happening.
Perfect. Thank you very much. That's all I have.
Councilmember McCoy?
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Weir, actually just had the two questions. So my question was basically, you had spoke of the working group that you're collaborating with. Wanted to find out, is there a name for the working group, or am I to assume it's this newly reconfigured WCAC? Like, who is the working group?
Well, there's a representative from the mayor's office, there's a representative from City Council, there is a representative, as I say, from OMB and Real Estate and Housing Department, because we have been working with HUD on a yearly basis, has been trying to be as helpful as possible. Okay,
so that is just no name, it's just basically the people from the different departments who are actually trying to get this information processed. Okay. The other question I had was about the CARES Act funds. And I am very familiar about how this thing works when it comes to the CDBG dollars. Wanted to find out whether or not a lot of these agencies who've actually already applied and received funding, will they be able to reapply if they're actually doing things with the COVID-19?
Absolutely, yes. As far as I think nationwide, what they're seeing is that oftentimes the communities, the folks that have the infrastructure already are the most effective and efficient delivering organizations to the and to the comment that was made earlier, an agency told to me the other day, and they said there was a 900% increase in requests for food out of their agency. Well, they had previously been funded through the state for the most part, but so they now are scrambling to try to meet that need. And again, as was said earlier, the city itself, we are participants. We don't really have enough money to be leaders in a lot of these ways, but certainly a couple $1 million out of the CARE funds can help a lot of citizens in the city of Wilmington.
All right, thank you. That's it, Mr. Weir.
Okay. What we're going to do now is jump back up to the top and go to question number 1. Discuss any proposed changes to positions, whether it's new positions, deleted, upgrades, etc.
Mr. Chair, there are no additions or deletions to positions in the department. There have, it was mentioned earlier that there were a number of findings that the department had suffered through as far as when we talk about the federal funds and the admin cap. There are a lot of activities that this department undertakes that are not eligible activities. I think also when you talk about our vision and goals, when we talk about the housing market in general, that's the easiest one to talk about because that is not income qualified. When you talk about helping neighborhoods being stabilized, it's not always about limiting income. So when we talk about the positions and how one or two might have been moved, it was born out of a audit finding, and we're trying to get that corrected. When we talk about the budget transfers from the CDBG fund to the general fund, that really is what it's about. And I think it also is in support of a homeownership initiative that we currently are not very robust in. We believe that even with the external events right now, once we return to normal, there is a pent-up demand for housing. There'll be a pent-up demand for home buyers. And I think that the city of Wilmington will be positioned well to take advantage of that. When we look at the $111,000 that's been charged back to the general fund, that's pretty much of an average when I look back at the last 4 years of what we've been overrunning. So, although it's an acknowledgement and a correction, I don't think it's an increase.
Do you have a mechanism in place now so that that kind of finding doesn't continue in the future?
Yes, we have our own in-house reconciliation process. There was a time the real estate and housing had a couple vacant positions, and that really did not help us moving forward to have a very orderly and accurate. Everybody in this department now keeps their time down to the hour. We have that reported and reconciled on a regular basis, so that it's not a reconciliation 6 or 8 months down the road. It's a reconciliation within 30 days of the close of that month's books. So we're trying to operate like a normal business would.
Discuss the proposed $1 million allocated for grant funds to the Wilmington Neighborhood Conservancy Land Bank. And there's a couple of additional questions to this one.
Well, first and foremost, part of the post-COVID-19 budget is that we're now asking for that to be reduced, believe it or not, to $550,000. When we look at the memorandum of understanding that was signed in 2017, or actually 2016, I'm sorry, that committed the city to supporting the land bank at the tone of $15 million over 10 years. There was only 1.5 given to the land bank in July 2017. When we look at, there has been $1 million being requested from the state bond bill for the organization. But when we look at it, we're really transitioning from what the land bank should be to what it is to what it should be. And as far as when I talk to the land bank staff, what's the common belief right now is that the operations, which is basically about $180,000 a year, maintenance, which can run up to $1,000 a property, about $300K a year, and then of course emergency demolitions, which this committee talked with Commissioner Starkey about. We've done a 10-year study, and right now we're believing that the average cost of a demolition is $50,000. So, I know that it was discussed if it's a 2-story or 3-story, but averaging out over 10 years, if you look at all the permits, it's 50,000 a unit. So you're talking about the inventory that they have. There is certainly a need, and what we're looking to do there is support the mission, which is basically stabilizing these neighborhoods, because these vacant properties, the dangerous properties, are it's an unhealthy influence on our community and the people that live there.
You stated that we're reducing it from 1 million to 550,000 in this budget.
Yes, in light of the shortfalls that were forecasted.
Councilmember Gray, did you have a question? Councilmember Gray.
Yes, I do have a question. Is this a cash grant or a property or a title grant or a combination?
The law department has not drafted the document, but I would certainly recommend that it would be drawn down on a receivables on a project basis. Certainly when you talk about their operations, they're estimating right now their operations need is about $180,000 a year. They too should be closing out their books within 30 days of the close of the month, and requesting those funds from the city would be my recommendation.
I don't know if that answered my question of how are we giving it to Wilmington House? I'm sorry, to the land bank. Is it going to be a cash grant, property, or title grant? The fact that they need the money, that wasn't really what I understand. They need money.
My understanding was the original million was going to be a cash grant.
Yes.
So I presume that now it's only 550,000, that will also be a cash grant?
That would be my assumption, yes.
Okay, thank you. And I have one more question, please. Who has the authority now to administer the land bank?
The board.
And who is the board? Names?
The board is represented by a number of individuals. I would not like to go down that list because I don't have it right in front of me. It was set up through the state's enabling legislation, who would be represented on the board, but there are state reps, there's city reps, there's community reps. I know that I sit on the board, and I would be happy to get that list of the board members to you.
Thank you. Chairman, could I follow up with questions? I have two more.
On this issue?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Now that the Wilmington Housing Partnership is a component of the city, real estate and housing, where is the budget presented in the 2021 budget for Wilmington Housing Partnership? And the reason I'm asking that is because in the audit, Wilmington Housing Partnership agreed to conform to certain things that the auditors had requested, and one was to hire an accountant. So I don't see those funds in the budget, or where are they?
Well, they haven't been approved by the board yet. The 2021 budget has not been approved by the board, but it is in place. And yes, they did hire an accountant.
And where are those funds coming from?
Well, they had been liquidating some of their scattered site properties, and that has been generally the only source of their revenue.
Okay, thank you. And you will forward to the members of the board?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. That's all I have, Chair.
Councilmember Adams?
Yes, thank you, Chairman Friel. Mr. Ware, nice to see you. Thank you for appearing here before us at the budget hearing. I was going to ask about land bank, but let me speak to the Wilmington Housing Partnership first. My understanding that the remaining properties, as you said, the scattered properties are going to be transferred to the land bank and the Wilmington Housing Partnership dissolved. Is that the plan?
Well, I believe the plan is that the city will have no further involvement with the housing partnership, but will work with the board to assist in dissolving the agency as soon as it's practical. Say, for instance, they still have a couple affordable housing homeownership projects that are in place, and that has contractors that are owed and so forth and so on. There are some details to properties that have mortgages that they need to be sold, and those mortgages need to be satisfied. So there are still some outstanding issues, but I think in the long term, we're looking forward to working with the land bank to determine the best use of the remaining housing partnership assets.
What's the time frame for that dissolution?
I would have to say right now, without delving too deep into it, when it's practical. Right now, there is no staff. We are looking to sell. We're actually looking to settle on our first home over at Waltz Way on Friday. I don't know what the future brings, but that particular project is one that, with those 4 homes sold, they're about 95% complete right this very second. By the way, if anyone knows of someone looking for a home, there are excellent products at 155. But say, for instance, that closing of those 3 additional properties will have a lot to do with it. There's a property that we have that's a commercial property, and there's a purchaser that is hasn't made a physical offer, but has talked it through. That closes, that moves the process along to basically, again, dissolve the agency as soon as it's practical.
I don't want to get into a major discussion about the partnership right now, because I don't believe there's money in the fiscal year 21 budget for it.
No.
If there are a lot of questions, I would suggest that Councilmember Dixon might add it to one of her agendas in the very near future.
Okay, Mr. Phil, I'll take that. With the understanding that if they're now a consolidated entity, that means they are part of the budget. So any sales of the home and wind down of that would be considered part of consideration of the overall budget. I just want to see us get out of the business as quickly as possible. And, you know, to say that there's no money in the budget, to me, that just, I can't believe that's an accurate statement. But okay, let's move on to the land bank.
As you know from our discussions, I agree with you 100% that we should dissolve this agency as soon as possible.
Yeah, hey, and I'm glad we're on the same page on that, but there are expenses that will be incurred between now and as the politically corrupt politician, Mr. Ware says, as practical as possible. You know, we've had some government programs that have been winding down practically as possible for, you know, 7 years.
Understood.
Yeah, that's land bank, okay? I'm sorry, didn't.
Do you have a question about the land bank?
Yeah, I have a couple of questions with regard to land bank. Okay. Hey, I realize we made a commitment of $1.5 million a year, okay, for a 10-year period, and we only funded it, according to Mr. Ware, in 2017. Are those 1.5? What about those 2 or 3 years of funding? Or they've been bypassed and we don't owe that money, or that money's forgiven, or is it tacked on the end, or what are we doing with that $4.5 million?
Well, I would answer that by saying that current situation and current conditions would demand that we be prudent in what we would contribute to their meaningful mission. When we talk about the years that were missed, I think that's probably up for discussion. You know, part of the issue is that there are a number of funders that are looking to make contributions, and there's been discussion that, you know, if it's a city initiative and the city's not contributing, then that doesn't give them a lot of confidence. So part of this is an initiative to get back on track and to also build confidence in some of the other contributors that this is a meaningful activity for the city.
Okay, now, you said that we're specifically issued for $1 million in the state bond bill. So is that $1 million in the state bond bill and $1 million in the city budget for a total of $2 million, or is that only $1 million coming from the state bond bill on behalf of the city?
Well, the request in the bond bill is exactly that, a request. From my understanding, the $550,000 that the original $1 million has been reduced to is in the budget for this, from the city's general fund.
Okay, so if the state comes through for them, the land bank's getting 1.55 this year, not just 1 or not just 550 is what you're saying.
Mr. Adams, the original plan was the mayor proposed $1 million in his budget, and there would be another $1 million in the state bond bill. So a total of $2 million for fiscal year 2021.
Yeah. And that's my concern right there, okay? Didn't the state already make its contributions and what it had originally committed to the land bank?
Not that I'm aware of.
Not that I'm aware of either, Councilman. I think that to date, the state has contributed approximately $1 million. And there's been approximately 1.5 from other philanthropic sources to date contributed. Now, when you think about it, they have right now a conservative estimate of 23 properties that need to be demolished in their inventory, and at 50,000 a lot. I mean, we talk about again what the need is versus what the resources are. We're still short as far as actual demand on the street.
I hear you, Mr. Ware, but my question pertains to, didn't the state originally commit $2 million up front and make that contribution?
Again, from my records, I believe the state has contributed $1,066,000 to date. Now, the land bank has made application and been successful going through the Strong Neighborhoods grant process through DSHA. I would argue that that's not the same as commitment from the state to support the organization, but they have received other funds from the state. I don't have that total right in front of me though.
Yeah, and my concern is that we're putting $1 million ask in a state bond bill for a land bank where that we're already behind in paying ourselves, and are we really pushing out other priorities in that state bond bill in order to get the $1 million for the land bank in it this year? And so certainly if we're required to pay $1 million a year to the land bank, that's really our commitment, and we shouldn't push out somebody else's $1 million to get our commitment of prior years in this year's state bond bill. So that's sort of a point of contention, I'm sure, to have with that state bond bill ask, because I really think it's a commitment in the city, and we're taking $1 million away from someplace else to put it into the land bank.
Mr. Adams, the request to the state for $1 million wasn't to replace any commitments the city had. And in fact, our budgetary restraints, we were trying to put $1 million up this year to show the state and other contributors that we were serious about this. So the goal was, before we got hit with this crisis, was for the next several years that the city would be putting up $1 million, the state would be putting up $1 million a year. Because as you know, from the amount of vacant properties we have in this city, $2 million isn't going to go far to really address this issue, that there has to be a longer term contribution made. So, but the $1 million, the bond bill wasn't to replace any city commitment. It was supposed to be two commitments there, one from the city, one from the state. And we were hoping to get $2 million this year.
Well, thank you, Mr. Fiore. You answered my question. Mr. Ware, thank you for your time, sir.
Thank you.
Councilmember Dixon? Councilmember Dixon?
Yes, thank you, Councilman Friel. Again, I think I may have three in one question. Director Ware, how many houses do we currently have in stock under real estate and housing? Then my next question would be, how many of our houses have been disposed of to the land bank? And then my last question is, actually just those two for now.
As far as we have transferred 92 properties to the land bank to date. Currently, and I say 92 properties, generally speaking, they are structures. Right now, the Real Estate and Housing Department has approximately 67 structures and close to 50 lots. One of the things that was discussed at the L&I hearing was the demolitions to private properties. And I'm not sure the commissioner said this, but the process is that the folks that can't pay for their properties that were demoed, then it goes to sheriff's sale. The sheriff's sale process then brings those into the inventory of the city, and the city then passes them through to the land bank. So that's the process for folks that have a property that's demoed but don't pay for it.
And then just a follow-up to that. So do we, and I guess this may be in the amount of money that we give to the land bank, but does some of those funds, I guess, cover dealing with our properties too?
Well, they haven't in the past, as far as we've been working as closely as we can since I've been in this office of trying to be, again, clever as possible. An example of that is that we are negotiating with the land bank right now to do grass cutting and trash pickup. They have a contract with a property management group that they are short on their inventory. They have offered that they would cut grass for us for a couple of months so that they could maximize their contract and minimize our costs. That would allow us then to deal with some of the properties that need to be demolished and so forth and so on. So, it's a big puzzle. And what we're trying to do is work together and with the land bank to make sure that we're being as effective and efficient in the neighborhoods as possible.
Thank you. That's all.
Okay. Let's move on to question number 3. Discuss the available fund balance in the Housing Opportunity Fund.
Mr. Chairman, there are no funds. There's no fund balance in the Housing Opportunity Fund right now, and there's no plans to replenish it that I know of.
Discuss the $400,000 proposed budget for the Neighborhood Clean Team Initiative. And there's 2 parts of that question.
Well, to date, the program's expended $271,000. The balance of those funds are earmarked for the remainder of this fiscal year. When we talk about their job, their weekly, the organizations that are participating in the program submit summaries of their activities to the project manager, who in turn reports to the department. The project manager makes daily inspections. We believe that the trash count that we measure by bags picked up is very effective in our neighborhoods. The folks that are being hired from the neighborhood. The organizations that are leading those work crews are the, again, community groups. And, it's all very tightly monitored with regular reporting. And I think that if on the soft side, if you go out to the neighborhoods that are working, you see a difference.
Right. Discuss the $85,000 budget proposed for the Live Where You Work program, and there's a couple parts to that question.
Yeah, this is a really success story, I believe, because this is dollars that have been approved by City Council to help city employees buy homes. So 33 city employees have participated in the program. When you look at the breakdown on this particular slide, it's very diverse as far as the departments that are taking advantage of it. What we do out of the Real Estate and Housing Department is that we, have a representative giving an overview of the program to every new employee orientation program. That person is also available to help with the softer questions of how do I do this? How do I do this? How do I do this? We require homeownership counseling for these folks before they get involved in the program. And once again, I think it's a real success story. And I think that we probably could enjoy some more funding and get it out to the employees. I think that it still doesn't necessarily meet the demand.
Discuss the $83,000 in consultants pertaining to the department's home ownership initiatives that is now being charged in general fund that was previously paid for by the CDBG fund.
Well, part of it is the Live Near Your Work program. We're anticipating that we are going to be working with the Delaware State Housing Authority in a city-centric program. That program does serve individuals above the HUD threshold, and we believe that's important to stabilize our neighborhoods, that we are looking at home buyers that are not limited to 80% median family income. So what we're looking at there is having a partnership with DSHA and also putting some federal funds in from our side so that we will have funds available for lower income home buyers and for folks that go up to 120% median family income. Once again, that needs to be, there's a lot of cooperation. There's a lot of information that needs to be shared. There's a lot of marketing to that. One of the issues that I've identified is that, there's very few market rate folks that are, if someone came in and said, hey, I'm looking for a house at $150,000, there's very few folks that are in the real estate profession to say, hey, I'll take you in the city. So we anticipate this particular the formerly CDBG funded position to be out marketing to the realtors, being marketing to the housing counselors, to be coordinating between the two income stratas as far as the program. And again, we think that we can, with not a whole lot of dollars, produce close to 100 home buyers in the city. And when you talk about that stabilization and you talk about that per unit cost, that becomes a little more efficient.
Councilmember Harley, do you have a question? Councilmember Harley?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me? Okay. I'm not sure if this is relevant right at this moment, but I was curious about funding for the census, the 2020 census. Did those funds go to your department, Mr. Weir?
No, Councilwoman, they did not.
Okay, well then we can move on. Thank you.
All right. Discuss the planned use of $400,000 budgeted between the disposition miscellaneous project account lines and the rehab division pertaining to disposition and property management. And there's two parts of that question.
Well, some of the things we're looking at that are very simple as far as the vacant property expenses, and that's cross cutting the list that you see in front of you as far as, I think there's not a lot of discussion. There's not a lot of discussion needed when you know that in our neighborhoods, vacant properties are magnets for dumping and all kinds of other things as far as the actual property. The properties also that come into our inventory are telling us one way or the other that they don't have any market value. So that's why we end up with them. So they generally are in bad shape. And that goes back to the cooperation between the land bank and the city. In some ways, when you talk about the contribution that the city's been making to the land bank, it might not have been a dollar granted to them, but it had certainly been in a cooperative nature where we would maybe, if we say, for instance, we're demolishing two buildings, one of them is theirs and one of them's ours, it made a lot more sense for us to actually take them both down. So, when you talk about those budget lines, we're also looking at currently to renovate a property in the city of Wilmington and sell it, you're looking at somewhere between $100,000 and $120,000 needed in subsidy. So what we're looking to do is we're looking, and part of that is because we don't have a lot of folks that are interested in work, a lot of construction resources that are interested in working in the city because they don't have the skills to go into a vacant property that's been vacant and deteriorating for 10 years and be able to bid on it successfully. So one of the things that we've been doing this year is that we've been doing interior property cleanouts, and that means taking it down to the studs. And we've also been putting a roof on those properties so that they don't deteriorate the properties that are on either side. And we're hoping, and we're seeing some progress, that contractors that come into a building that have been stripped out and there's no surprises, that's more like bidding on new construction work versus going in and saying, I don't know what's behind that wall. I don't know what the condition of that is, and I'm going to try to bid on it. We think that part of those dollars is to move towards a building that is more appealing to not only the construction resources, but also it's going to save us money in the long run. And also, when we have these properties, they're not going to be leaking and deteriorating into the properties next door. Because, if you talk to anybody that lives next to a vacant property, I mean, it's between the water infiltration, the animals, the behaviors that it attracts, like the dumping and things like that. So that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to put a system together that we're using the money as cleverly as possible and making it more really appealing for someone to come in and look at it and say, geez, I can see exactly what's going on there. And that's going to be a big initiative for us because this year we did it a couple times. A perfect example is that there's a property on 6th Street that it was going to cost us $50,000 to demo, and we ended up putting a new front on it, a new roof, and stripping it all out for about 30. And what we have now is we have a property that is not a toothy neighborhood. We didn't destroy a property in the middle of the block. Now we have a shell that there are people that are interested in going in there and renovating. And I think that's the key. We have to market ourselves in every way we can when we talk about neighborhood stabilization.
Question number 8, we already covered. That was the CDBG question. Question number 9, like other departments, he provided a organizational chart and some descriptions of some of his positions. Council members can look at that at their leisure. I can't see what it is. Councilmember Dixon, did you have a question before we go to public comment?
Yes, really quickly. I just wanted to know, Director Ware, are we getting better feedback on our properties? I know people have brought up that our properties are not as secure and not taken care of in the same capacity. Have we been hearing a different story around our properties?
I believe we have, because we've been cooperating with the land bank. Now, the land bank has a crew that is out on a daily basis. What we do as far as on the city side is that we basically have subcontractors that we call out on jobs. Now, that's a little more efficient as far as dollars and cents, because we're not paying for someone that's just driving around and we don't have that much control. But the combination of the two, I think, has actually done a service to the community. From my perspective, one of the issues is that if you have a property that's been in your neighborhood for 10 or 15 years and no one's ever answered when you complained about it, other than L&I coming out and citing them, and then suddenly it goes into an ownership that you can call someone up, it seems to me that a lot of times that pent-up frustration that, hey, it's been vacant and not taken care of for 10 years, but now I know I can call somebody up and they'll answer the phone, drives more calls to us. But we've been working on it, and I believe we've had less. And we're also working in cooperation with L&I, so we have a lot more eyes on the street than we've had previously. And I think that the complaints have actually gone down. They're not going to go away. I mean, over the last couple of weeks, we've had a serious increase, and Commissioner Starkey talked about it, a serious increase in trees being blown down by the weather. And again, you show me an abandoned building and I'll show you a bad tree. They go hand in hand. So, a lot of these properties that we have, they have the trees that are, trash trees that are in bad shape, and we get a hold of them, and the luck is that the wind blows them over. Well, now that person next door knows exactly who to call, because it's either the city or the land bank, and they know we'll be responsive.
Okay.
Thank you.
At this time, I'd like to go ahead and open it up for any public comment. Is there anyone who has been participating that would like to make comment on the Department of Real Estate and Housing's fiscal year 2021 budget? Okay, I'm not seeing anyone. Mr. Weir, thank you for joining us today and answering all our questions. We appreciate it. There were a couple things that you're going to work with Marshall to get answers for council members.
Absolutely.
I want to thank again my colleagues for participating tonight and for asking your questions. And this concludes this meeting of Wilmington City Council's Finance and Economic Development Committee. Thank you all.